Vietnam in particular was bombed more intense. Well, first of all, Korea, during the Korean War, Korea was bombed more intensively than the whole of Europe was during World War II. And then Vietnam was bombed multiple times more than that. In Korea, you had US pilots who were complaining that there were no targets left.
Well,
And this was considered...
napalm.
Exactly, napalm also. Absolutely. Agent Orange. So the idea of mass bombing, of basically mass slaughter from the air, is incredibly normalized as a normal tactic of war. And you heard the Israelis very much try to leverage this. They were like, we're just using the tactics that you guys used against Japan, or when you bombed certain German cities, mass terror bombing. And the fact that it's like, oh, the good guys did it in World War II, so obviously, we can do it as well. So yeah, I think it's very interesting how this historical narrative about what is an acceptable way to fight and what isn't very much excuses mass murder as long as it's done from the air in particular, and as long as it's done with expensive weaponry. Yeah, any other thoughts on that?
I think somehow this is true and not true, because it depends who you're talking about. Because when they talk about the other war that is affect to Europeans like crazy, like Ukraine and Russia become like a monster.
Absolutely.
That is attacking electrical power things and things that attack every day Israel, and it's okay if Israel do it.
Yeah.
It's really terrible when do it Moscow. For me, it's terrible when do it both. When
Yeah.
it's like Moscow is fighting really, Russia is fighting in a really Western typical style, but them is not the good guys.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, right? Like even this bias in favor of, mass bombing or mass shelling. When it comes to an enemy, if it's Russia doing it to Ukrainians, then it's like, oh, okay, turns out it's actually brutal and ruthless and cruel. So yes, there's no consistency, or as you say, it's really who's doing it.
In French,
To who?
deux poids, deux mesures.
Absolument, exactly, double standard. Yes.
I saw someone tweet and say that it only matters if it's white people being killed, brown people killed.
Right, exactly. It's only matters of white people with blue eyes, in Europe. Like, I remember the first few days of the Ukraine invasion, like, you had these Western journalists in Kiev who were like, this is happening in a European country, like, this is not Syria, this is not Iraq, like, it was pretty, I remember it was pretty shocking.
Poland opened up the borders to like refugees and stuff only if they were white. If they were black people or Ukrainian, no.
Actually, they were cutting the people who was there like a study.
Yeah.
Was not right. They was don't let them pass.
So they left the colonized people to be the human shields in Ukraine.
There you go. Yeah. Exactly. I'll just quickly read this quote because I think it's totally shocking and like it's actually deranged. Like, so people had made complaints about the CBC standards for the discrepancy in how the adjectives that they used for Palestinian versus Israeli violence. And so this is the quote. The raid saw Hamas gunmen stream through the border fence and attack Israelis directly with firearms, knives, and explosives. The attack was brutal, often vicious, and certainly murderous. Bombs dropped from thousands of feet and artillery shells lofted into Gaza from kilometers away always result in death and destruction on a massive scale, but it is carried out remotely. Notice that this is like implied as like this is an argument in itself. It's done remotely. Obviously, it's more civilized.
They not use drones?
And drones, yeah. The deadly results are unseen by those who caused them, and the source unseen by those who suffer and die. By the way, this idea that if it's remote and the results are unseen is foundational to how the Nazis designed the Holocaust, right? It's the idea, initially the Holocaust was carried out by, Nazis and their collaborators murdering Jews, Roma, yes,
All
gay
of the
people,
minorities.
gay people, communists, Soviet prisoners of war,
Exactly.
in old-fashioned ways, right? Shooting, other ways, you know, in mass graves. Eventually they realized this is starting to have a negative impact on our own soldiers. You know, massacring people close up, as you know, up close and personal, has a psychological effect on the murderers.
Sobibor.
Exactly, Sobibor, etc. Well, Sobibor was one of the death camps where the Nazis experimented with all these more sophisticated, high-tech ways to murder large amounts of people without having to get up close and personal, right? And the Nazis really believed that they were being more civilized in the way that they were murdering people. So yeah, this idea of alienating the murderer from the result, right? And it's just shocking because this argument, like the CBC person is making the exact same argument. Like, it's unseen, it's being done with high tech, so obviously it's more civilized. And by that end, the Nazis viewed things exactly the same way. We are not barbarians. We are not murdering people with knives. We're not murdering people with rifles. You know, we are doing it with Zyklon B. We are doing it in gas chambers. It is ordered. There is like a whole system. It's efficient. It's like we're doing it like a factory. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else has some thoughts, but that for me is like, it's just insane on so many levels. Yes.
Well, and the way that they like recruit drone operators and entice people by like,
Very high tech.
yeah,
Crying
and
babies
even
sound.
drone operators from the U.S. or from so-called Israel will like say it's like a video game, you know? It's like you just go into an office and play a video game, and so it's like this totally disembodied genocidal mania that people don't even have to think about, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
'Cause
war
it-
game.
Yeah, it's a game. It's a game to them. They click some buttons, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's the civilized way to do it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there is this assumption that, well, ultimately, yeah, it is a bit less immoral. It's not as yucky because, yeah, you're doing it.
Because you don't have to look them in the eye.
Exactly. So you're preserving yourself. Yeah, it makes you want to vomit.
But then they'll also literally go and put on fucking bras and underwear of the people they just killed.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I guess we can all take a deep breath.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say something too. I think,
Please.
You're saying that they've become like numb and indifferent to suffering of Palestinians. I think it could potentially be even